Adonai Erohi lo echsa.
The 23rd Psalm.
Bino de sheyarbitzeini al mei menuchot, al mei menuchot yeraleiri. Nafshi yishovev, yishovev, yancheini b'maglei tzedek, yancheini b'maglei tzedek, leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeitz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha heimayena chamuni. Taroch lefanai, lefanai, shulchan neged tzorerai, dishanta vashemen roshi kosirevaya. Ach tov chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, kol yemei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai leyorech yamim. Adonai Elohi lo echsa. Adonai Elohi lo echsa.
An interpretive version of the English of the 23rd Psalm, Paths of Fullness by Rabbi Brant Rosen. The Holy One is my guide, my life is whole. We journey together over fertile hillsides and rest beside nourishing springs. This is my spirit ever renewed, for my guide leads me down paths of fullness, even when my steps lead into the kingdom of death. I do not fear, for I know you are with me. Your presence, your shelter is a comfort to me. With you, I can set myself aright in the face of deepest sorrow, and soon my joy is filled to overflowing. As I journey on, Nothing but kindness and love shall follow until the day I finally return to my source, my destination. We come together at a time of absolute tragic loss so that we hold each other up through the shadow of the valley, and we accompany this brave, loving family who have been steadfast in their commitment to their daughter, to what was maybe going to be possible. And they stayed and they stayed and they stayed and they stayed vigilant. This is all we can do sometimes in the face of what is inevitable. We are frail, we are human, we are vulnerable, and we shouldn't be here now doing this. But we are, because we need to honor Molly's spirit, her grit, her spunk, her smile, and we need to accompany her family in celebrating her life and honoring her memory. We're a people of words. So we have liturgy, we have prayers. Words seem completely insufficient, and they are. Words are completely insufficient. But Molly loved words. Molly loved words. And teacher Lauren said about Molly that if she got curious or connected to a word, she'd ask about it the rest of the day. And like one answer, two answers weren't enough for Molly about a word she was really intrigued by. So we're gonna use words because that's the only thing we have other than being present, which all of you have chosen to do, all of you joining us via technology and Zoom. We join with people all over the world who have been following Molly's story. We join with people all over the world who have been drawn in to what it means for a little girl and her family to be fighting for her life. So we come to words, but words also convey memory. They convey the personality and the relationship and the love that we have for each other. And so most of a Jewish funeral is hesped, is sharing our words as an attempt to share what we can, just a glimpse, a photograph in words of who someone has been to us. And so to begin hesped, to begin our time of eulogy, I'm going to ask Jonathan to speak first, and then Molly's grandmother, Anne Steinsapir, will speak after Jonathan.
Thank you, first of all, Rabbi Amy and Cantor Chaim, for the reading of the 23rd Psalm, which it's not original to me, but it's my favorite psalm, both in the Hebrew and in the English. So thank you. I usually speak extemporaneously. I speak for a living as a lawyer, and I just outline my thoughts, but I really couldn't do that here. So forgive me a little bit if I'm reading. So I'm here to say a few words about my daughter, Molly. As you can imagine, I'm in a lot of pain right now, but I'm going to try not to focus on me and the pain and the hurt. Rather, I intend to focus on Molly and the joy and pride she brought to me and to so many others. I know everyone says this about their children, and they should. Molly is an incredible, special, and amazing girl. From the very first day she was born, and I can still see it in the first pictures of her as a newborn, Molly was paying attention to everyone and everything, analyzing everything, and trying to learn and make sense of things. And indeed, for her first 4 months, until we could sleep train her, she was a very difficult sleeper. She would hardly nap for more than 10 or 15 minutes. She woke up all the time. She refused a pacifier for more than 30 seconds or a minute at most. And both Kay and I would try everything to put her back to sleep, with most of that burden falling to Kay. I'm sure some of my friends and family will remember all the tricks we'd try. I still vividly remember my friends, Marius, Ginger, Dave, and Lauren coming over to see her for the first time when she was just a few weeks old. And they just saw me and Kay taking turns bouncing on a yoga ball with Molly for the entire time they were there. Some days we'd have a hairdryer going in the bathroom for hours in the hope that the white noise would calm her somehow. We then tried using a recording of a hairdryer, recordings of rain, recordings of the ocean, recordings of a heartbeat, anything, everything. But nothing really worked more than 1, 2, or 3 times. It was just 4 long months. And Kay finally saw a special sleep consultant whose very expensive advice was basically to just let her cry it out with a few modifications once she turned 4 months old. And I remember coming home the Friday night we started to sleep train her. I remember this very well. But I came home with a big bottle of vodka to cope with the anticipated crying. And Molly definitely drove me to drink that night. I forget the exact numbers. I used to know them. They're probably written down somewhere. But on 2 occasions that first night, she cried it out for well over an hour each time, as me and her mother cringed in horror hearing her baby crying. But she quickly got it. The second night was much less extreme. And the third night, she was sleeping like a baby. Something just clicked, and she was a relatively sound sleeper from then on out and the rest of her life. I tell this story because I'm convinced that her mind, even at that young age, was just so busy trying to learn and understand things around her that she could not sleep at first until she was taught to do so. She was just too busy observing and trying to figure out this strange world she found herself in. At about 7 or 8 months, when Kay went back to work, Molly went to Hillendale, a daycare and nursery school in Santa Monica, thanks to our friend Leslie Helmer, who's here, where she thrived for several years. There, she learned how to sit at a table and eat, and there she made her first friends. Her brother Nate was eventually born when she was 21 months old, and he soon joined her at Hillendale 6 or 7 months later. And Molly adored Nate from just about the first moment she met him. And I remember the teachers at Hillendale talking about how she would ride her tricycle around the yard. It was a small little yard. And she would always stop at the little baby yard that was fenced in from the yard. And she would stop and say, "Hi, baby Nate," and proudly tell the other 2 and 3-year-olds that that was her baby brother. And then she went on her way, only to constantly circle back to him every few minutes, stop, and say, "Hi, baby Nate." It was also at that time, when she was 4 years old, that she decided that she was going to be a vegetarian. And neither me, nor Kay, nor our families are vegetarians. But Molly, at 4 years old, just didn't like the idea of eating animals. And at 4 years old, she decided she was a vegetarian, and that was that. There was nothing we could do about it but try, and try to get her to eat protein in some form, ultimately getting her to agree to eat fish, but she largely reneged on that agreement. Later on, Molly came here to Kehilat Israel, for her last year of preschool. And I remember that they were so happy to have her because her class only had 4 other girls and like 10 boys. And I still remember the 4 girls. It was Bella, Evie, Sunny, and of course, Emmy, who's here, who just so happened to live a few houses above us on the same block, and who Molly would be friends with for the next 8 years. And taking a step back, Kay was not born Jewish, and we were not married in a Jewish ceremony. Rather, she decided to convert of her own volition after we were married. She completed her conversion to Judaism, and she went before the Beit Din and into the mikvah at the American Jewish University off the 405 when she was pregnant with Molly. And it was here at KI that we really discovered that Molly's soul was as Jewish as those of our ancestors who stood before Mount Sinai thousands of years ago, receiving the Torah and laws from Moses. Looking back, I'm sure Molly's soul called out to Kay long before Molly was born and told her to become a Jew so she, Molly, could be one too. And turning back here to KI, and although it was only her first year at KI, with kids who had been here for 2 or 3 years already, which was most of their life at this time, Molly's dear teachers in the Silver Room, Eileen and Jandira, consistently remarked that she was the rabbi of the group, as she confidently explained Jewish concepts and philosophy as only a 5-year-old can to her classmates and teachers. Now, Israel, not the modern state, but the larger Jewish people, Am Yisrael, is named for Jacob, our ancestor, whose name God changed to Israel because he wrestled with God. He struggled with God and he argued with God, just as Abraham did in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Molly was exactly part of that tradition, wrestling with God and the traditions of her ancestors. For example, Molly did not like the idea that Eve came after Adam. So I actually pointed out to her that that's actually the second story about humanity's origins in the first chapter of Bereshit, or Genesis, the first book of the Torah. And actually, the first story says quite clearly that God created man and woman together in his own image. Zacharu nekeva bara otam, man and woman, he created them. You can look it up. It's Genesis 1:27, before the Adam and Eve story. So recently, when I was telling the kids a story from the Bible, from the Torah, Molly challenged me about why I always referred to God as he or him, as she said God was everything, and I should use both he, she, etc. I told her that that was just the way I learned about God, and that I used those words because it's the way I was taught to think of God. She really did not like my answer, and she argued with me about it, but I stood my ground. And that's the way I thought of God, and Molly should envision God her own way. We're all created in God's image, as Genesis tells us. But she still didn't like the answer, so I told her we just had to agree to disagree. But Molly was not done with that, so she apparently appealed to a higher court. Specifically, about a week later, I got a call from my mom, who told me that Molly had told her about our conversation, and that she, my mom, who also had been raised to think of God in male terms, now agreed with Molly, and that I was sending the wrong message by insisting on always using he and him to describe God. But I still stood my ground because I'm stubborn like Molly. But now in these last few weeks, I've thought a lot about that conversation. And in these last few weeks, as you can imagine, I've also said a lot of prayers. And in the Jewish prayers, for those of us who know them, we often refer to our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Avotenu, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. And that's how I learned the prayers, even in the Reform prayer books of my youth. Now today, in the prayer books of all non-Orthodox movements, including the conservative movement, the Reform movement, the Reconstructionist movement, those are always coupled with references to our foremothers, who are Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, Imotenu, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. And I never added those when I prayed, because I'm a small c conservative, not politically conservative, just conservative in certain ways. But with Molly in mind, every single time I've said these prayers the last few weeks, and it's been a lot, like many, many, many times a day, I never skip Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah anymore. So as I'm a lawyer, so as Felix Frankfurter, the great Jewish Supreme Court justice, said, wisdom too often never comes, and so one ought not reject it merely because it comes too late. But I should say in these next few days and weeks, my references to God will surely be in the masculine, because I'd like to think that the feminine aspect of God is not what let this happen. But that was Molly. At 11 years old, this was just during this last year in the pandemic, she was wrestling with God and our tradition. And that's the most Jewish tradition of them all. She was a very Jewish girl. And I could tell stories of Molly's wisdom and intellect forever, so I won't continue too much longer, but there's one more story that just so encapsulates her that I must tell it. In 3rd grade at Marquez Elementary School, Molly's teacher, Mrs. Schwartz, had the kids do a report on the life of a great American, in character as that great American. And ultimately, the parents were all invited to the class to speak to all the kids in character, with the kids speaking in character. So there were the classics like Lincoln, Washington, and Jefferson. But Mrs. Schwartz encouraged the kids to choose a woman or minority and gave them lists of great Americans like that. So we also saw Eleanor Roosevelt, Jackie Robinson, Martin Luther King Jr., all of blessed memory. But who did Molly do? Molly did Deborah Sampson. And other than those of us who know this story, does anyone know who Deborah Sampson is? It's a rhetorical question. I didn't, and I'm like a true history buff. I know a lot. I'm not being humble about this one. My dad, who's also quite the history buff, didn't know. Same with my mom. My wife, Kay, didn't know. We're all pretty educated people. Well, Deborah Sampson, as we learned from Molly, was the first woman to fight in the US military. She posed as a man and fought in the American Revolution. She was even shot and wounded. She then was denied her pension because she was a woman until someone, and I think it's Patrick Henry, but I couldn't find out when I was writing this speech, interceded on her behalf. But there's a crazy thing about all this. At Molly's parents' teacher conference, just after that with Mrs. Schwartz, I complimented Ms. Schwartz on Molly knowing this and that Mrs. Schwartz had included Deborah Sampson on this list as a person to do a report on. But Mrs. Schwartz told me that she had no idea who Deborah Sampson was until Molly told her. And she just assumed that it was me or Kay that had given Molly the idea, but we didn't. Molly came up with this on her own in 3rd grade. She's 8 years old. We think, but we're not entirely positive, that she learned of Deborah Sampson from watching a cartoon called Liberty Kids when she was quite a bit younger, and there was a reference to her and it just somehow stuck in her head somewhere. And a few years later, I saw an article in the New York Times, the headline of which was, quote, "The woman who sneaked into George Washington's army," end quote. It was about Deborah Sampson and the renewed historical interest in her. And I'd like to think, and we can't prove it, but I'd just like to think it, that we can trace that article back to Molly's report, that someone talked to someone to talk to someone that mentioned Deborah Sampson, and it eventually got the ear of a reporter. But this was so Molly, a 3rd grade girl coming up with a unique idea on her own, and the story appealed to everything she believed in. A person doing something right, even when people told her she wasn't supposed to do it. A woman showing that she was just as good as a man, and injustice to boot, being denied her pension because she was a woman when she had done as well as, if not better than, all the men who were getting their pension. I mean, she'd been shot, for God's sake. Now, I've spoken so much about Molly's intellect and wisdom, I don't want to leave anyone with the idea that she was not also just a fun little girl. She loved to go swimming in the ocean and to dive under the waves. She loved to boogie board. She just loved the ocean and was so free and so brave there. In the last few months, she asked me several times if Uncle Nick and Uncle Matt would teach her to surf, and I know she would have done it. She loved to play handball when she was in elementary school. Surely some in my family will remember her making them play handball with her against our garage or against my parents' garage. She loved baking with her aunts, particularly sweets, and with her mom too, and her brother Nate. And she loved to lick the spoon afterwards. She loved musical theater and performed in plays at Theater Palisades and at Marquez, starring as Princess Jasmine in a Marquez summer production of I was going to say it with an accent, with Aladdin. She also had roles in musicals like Peter Pan, Guys and Dolls, and The Little Mermaid. And she never let anyone tell her she wasn't good enough for anything. And I remember she was once upset that she didn't get a part she wanted. It went to an older girl with more experience. And a friend of Kay's told Kay that she shouldn't worry about it because Molly would be producing all the plays and movies eventually. My wife Kay made this point to me when we were coming to terms with what God has done a few days ago. And it's so true. Molly had 12 great years. She had a very happy 12 years, a happier life than most. She never experienced disaster or heartbreak. She was loved very much by me, by her mom, by her brothers, Nate and Eli, by Mimi, by Grammy, by Baba, by her aunts and uncles, her cousins, her neighbors, her friends and classmates, and by so many others. Molly was named for my grandmother, my father's mother, Molly Steinsapir, same name. I know that my Molly had a piece of Grandma Molly in her, and I'm positive that is why her aunts, uncles, and so many others who sometimes can't agree on anything could all agree on one thing, and that was that Molly was extraordinary. And I'd like to close with a lyric that has not left my mind for the last week. And it's not from the Psalms, the Torah, or it's not from a great piece of Western literature or poetry, rather. Of all places, it comes from a song by Don McLean, the American singer-songwriter, best known for his song, American Pie. I'm not a big fan of his or anything, but a lyric from another song of his about Vincent van Gogh just keeps going through my head, and it has been when I've been thinking about Molly. Now, Van Gogh, of course, passed away under very different circumstances, of course, but the lyric that stands out just encapsulates my feelings. And it's, I could have told you, Vincent, that this world was never meant for one as beautiful as you. And Molly, I hate saying it, but this world was never meant for one as beautiful as you. And I know you're still with us, but you're in a better world now. You're with my grandma, Molly, who's so proud of you. You're with your grandpa, Paul, who's your great grandpa, Paul, I should say, who is teaching you about animals. You're with Nanny and Papa. You're with your cats, Lila and Ellie. We're comforting you, I know. And I miss them too. You're with my friend Ryan, who is protecting you as he would have liked to protect his own daughter. But he was taken from this world just a few weeks after his daughter was born. It was 20 years ago. You're with my dear friend Max Wolf, who's making you laugh with some silly song and telling you a story of something dumb your dad did when we were in middle school or high school. And thank you, Molly, for choosing me to be my daughter. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm just so proud of you. I'm just really so proud of you, Molly. I'm just so proud, and I could never have a better daughter. And I love you so much. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Into the mic, Grandma.
Good afternoon. I too will be reading because I cannot speak without notes today. Molly walked into her Baba's and my hearts the day she was born. Yesterday, Lori and I talked and talked, trying to find the perfect anecdote about Molly that would give a picture of the totality of her spirit. We found we just couldn't find one that would capture all that she is. Ancients thought of life as a thread that follows us through our time on earth. But that doesn't work for Molly. Molly is a complete tapestry with color and texture and pattern made up all she is. To use a Whitman phrase, she contains multitudes. Foremost, her profound, precious love for her mother, father, Nate, and Eli, and all her uncles and aunts and cousins, and by extension, her friends. Her love and curiosity about her faith and the nature of God, which I believe led to her deep commitment to fairness and justice, Nikolai Tesla and Deborah Sampson come to mind. And to that end, her love of research and reading, her love of all the arts, violin, musicals and plays, writing, drawing and painting and weaving bracelets, and the wonder of all nature. Her love of the ocean, which Jonathan mentioned, and swimming. She swam in many of our California beaches from Pismo to San Diego, the Hawaiian beaches on the Big Island, Maui and Kauai, and the glacial lake in eastern Canada where she learned to canoe. She loved animals, Leroy, Calvin, and her other cats, and her horseback riding experience. Every one of these few examples she met with exuberance and enthusiasm. To the ancient Greeks, enthusiasm means filled with God. And truly, Molly is filled with all the goodness, beauty, love, and wonderment that God gives to us. So although yesterday, Lori and we spoke of so many of our memories of Molly, not one would ever be able to contain the uncontainable spirit of our girl. She is truly the definition of celebration, the celebration we make in our lives and in honor of Molly while we have this time on earth. Molly walked into Baba's and my heart the day she was born, and there she remains forever.
Thank you both for such beautiful words that paint such a vivid picture of aspects of who Molly was. As Rabbi Amy mentioned, we use words for so many parts of how we emote and process and come to terms and realities with such difficult, horrible truths. We use psalms, songs, poetry to try to make sense of things that don't make sense if we just try to talk them out. They don't make sense. Psalm 121 kind of helps with this notion of perspective. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. There is a true beauty to where we live. Right here, where we are all gathered, we are nestled between mountains and sea. We bear witness to the beauty of nature at all times of the year by being here. And this positioning reminds us of just how fragile our lives are in comparison to these massive installations of nature around us. We are but one small piece in an ever-moving puzzle of this world. And that same vastness also brings us comfort to recognize that we cannot have all the answers. We cannot discover every perspective. We may simply exist between these massive installations of mountain and sea. The level of wisdom and insight, acceptance in our world that would come to understand that has to be done with the right temperament. Molly asked 1,000 questions. She asked big questions and little questions. She didn't concern herself with how important that specific question was. She discovered and investigated everything around her. And she did it with this temperament and this humor and this understanding of other people in a space that was simply amazing to be a part of. She spoke up when something was wrong. She made a joke if she found the right moment for it. I mean, that was also very important. My time with Molly was always on Wednesdays when she was tutoring with Lauren, the same teacher who she had, who she knew through the preschool, then through all of tutoring. And I would just interrupt them for like 5 seconds every week. And it just started once or twice. And then Molly started to think of jokes ahead of time to have back, say something pithy or quick or clever. And it became part of how she understood this moment. When I come to tutoring on Wednesdays, this is part of my experience. This is part of my Jewish education. This is part of my living in my Jewish world. I'm so fortunate that I got to have those moments with Molly. And I go back to saying that as Chaim sings these words of Esai and I echo that these words are not enough, but that these words do help to try to bring us comfort, to try to give us some explanation, to remember that God, the maker of the mountains and the seas, that our help, our comfort, our love will come from that divine spirit and source.
אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם אדוני, עושה שמיים וארץ. עזרי מעם אדוני, עושה שמיים וארץ. אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. אדוני ישמרך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמר צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי.
As Jonathan said, one of our most ancient customs as a Jewish people is thinking critically about our tradition by parsing out every single detail, by thinking through the meaning, and by asking questions about why and how. Molly upheld this most ancient tradition by taking her role as a Jew very seriously. She wanted to understand, not just be told that it was. She wanted to find a meaning for herself, not just to do something because we had been doing it for a really long time. In the way that we wish for every child, she took on the responsibility of being Jewish long before we expect that responsibility from our children. She asked us, did that really happen? And why do we have to believe this when it doesn't even make sense? And you're telling me I'm supposed to call God awesome? And she did all of these things with her head slightly cocked to the side and her eyes slightly squinted as if to say, go ahead and convince me. Any educator will tell you that it's the kids who argue back with us, the kids who push us to find better and more thoughtful answers. These are our favorite kids. And I know we're not supposed to have favorites, but Molly was one of our favorites. Our tradition includes the Ve'ahavta prayer in each service as a reminder of our responsibility to pass on our Judaism to our children, to that next generation. that we are to look at each child as if they will change the world and give them the values and guidance from our tradition to help them do that. And there's not a doubt in my mind that Molly would have changed the world. We're told that we're supposed to ensure this passing on of our most sacred values by making them prominent in our lives, by living them day and night, and by sharing them publicly with those around us. And even at her young age, Molly was already doing all of those things. And so that means that the mantle falls to us to do what has been done for generations past and the ones that will follow. Please join me if you'd like in chanting Ve'ahavta. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha Vishinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha v'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha Uvisharecha. We invite up the Green family.
Where I'm From by Molly Steinsapir. I'm from my bookshelf, from the couch and my phone. I'm from the garden in my backyard, small, fresh, the vegetables taste like candy. I'm from the flowers on the dining room table, from the strawberries in the garden, whose sweet flavor tastes wonderful. I'm from pasta and breadsticks, from John and Kay. I'm from Do Your Homework and Great Job, from Get Off Your Phone and Shabbat Shalom.
I'm from lighting the candles on Shabbat, from opening presents on Hanukkah. I'm from America and Israel, from the time Nate got a concussion at school, the time when Eli drew all over my bedroom wall. In the garage is a small orange plastic bin filled with photos and other things that remind me of happy memories. I'm from that plastic bin, from all my happy memories of the people I love. I'm from the things that make me happy.
My name is Lyle Green. Thank you. My name is Lyle Green, and this is my wife, Melanie. We're the parents of Emerson, McCall, Piper, and Tatum. Emerson and Molly are best friends, and we all love Molly and the Steinsapirs very much. Molly is so special. She is smart, funny, and mature. She shared her convictions with our whole family, whether it was about her love of animals or lessons in politics. She defended her position with passion, and we all learned something when she spoke. Molly and Emerson, special relationship started in preschool here at KI. We noticed on the class roster that there was a family on our street and soon had the girls getting together for play dates. They've shared countless birthdays, Halloweens, and this past year, backyard family dinners. They played many board games, Sorry being the go-to favorite, and recorded several videos of the Snow Sisters on the iPad in Steinsapir's dining room. They looked out for each other when they were in school together and had so many sleepovers. I truly believe that Emerson wanted to move in with you. They commiserated on sibling rivalry and had matching PJs. She was the one person in Emerson's life that she was truly able to be herself around, and that was a gift we all appreciated. Emerson loves Molly and her family so much, and she will always hold those memories close to her heart. I also had a special relationship with Molly. I loved to give her a hard time, whether it being Colleen or Malo, which I believe she actually liked after a month, or joking that I put meat in her food, which John talked about her being a vegetarian, and whatever I could do to get a rise out of her, but it really never worked. She would look at me and just say, "Oh, Lyle," and smile. There are countless moments I've been thinking about over the past 3 weeks regarding how much fun we had over the years together, But most of all, I remember Malo's incredible grace when we were on a school trip to Sacramento. She and Emmy wanted to make sure everyone was included, and she didn't stand for any type of bullying. Since COVID started, we saw a lot of Malo. For years, I had told her that she didn't have to knock when she came to our house because she was family. During COVID, she would come up to drop off or pick up something and finally felt comfortable enough walking into the house. Of course, I would ask her why she didn't knock, and she would laugh. The best part of those visits for me was if Emmy wasn't home and she didn't play with McCall, Piper, or Tatum, I got to hang out with her. She would come into the house. I would say, Emmy isn't home, and she would sit down and talk to me. I'm going to miss Malo's smile and her laugh, but most of all, I'm going to miss those conversations. We love you, Molly. John and Kay, you guys are unbelievable people. Throughout this incredibly difficult time, you've been genuinely concerned about Emerson and our family's well-being. We love you guys very much, and we'll always be there to support you.
Thank you all for loving our Molly Olivia. I know that her spirit is with us and that she feels our embrace. She knows the impact her life made on everyone here, and indeed on people in 152 countries and 48 territories and islands across the globe. Molly, my love, people from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe have seen you. They've been united and inspired to do good things because of you. Molly was exceptional from the beginning. As with everything she did, Molly made her entrance in her own time. After being on bed rest for months because my doctor feared she would be born prematurely, I was induced a week past my due date. I always joked with Molly that she didn't want to separate from me because her delivery was so long and difficult. And she would always smile when I said that. She knew it was true. I remember looking up at John before Molly arrived. We were in the delivery room, and he was standing over my shoulder, basically as far away from what was happening as possible, with all the color drained from his face. And I thought they were going to need to bring in an extra bed for him. Fortunately, Molly was born before we reached that point. She was an absolute force of life, weighing in at just under 9 pounds after they thought she was going to be 3 or 4 pounds. And I will never forget looking into her almost black eyes for the first time and how my heart felt like it was going to explode. When Molly was placed into John's arms, he looked awestruck. It was love at first sight, and the bond between the two of them deepened every day that followed. As John mentioned, none of us got any sleep for the first several months of Molly's life. Molly was a baby who needed all of the 5 S's from the Harvey Karp method. And for those who aren't parents and or haven't been recently, that's swaddle, shush, side position, swing, and giving the baby something to suck. The first time we left Molly at home in the capable hands of John's parents, we went out to dinner and returned to find that Molly had consumed the entire supply of breast milk in the refrigerator, and her grandmother, Anne, was bouncing her on the fitness ball next to the loud sound of the hairdryer. And her Baba, her grandfather, Laurie, who had many children himself, looked like he had never seen anything so crazy in his life, and he could not leave fast enough. Although Laurie wasn't in any hurry to babysit again for a few months, Molly and her Baba soon became intimately connected. Molly was also blessed by 2 grandmothers, Anne and Karen, who delighted in everything about her. Molly grew into an inquisitive baby. It was obvious that she was an old soul. She loved to sit at a coffee shop and take in all the different faces. I took her to a group for moms and babies once a week. In the many times we went there,
Molly was the only baby who never once napped while we all sat in a circle across the floor. She never took a nap. Those deep brown eyes of hers never closed. She didn't want to miss a thing. Molly's brother Nate was born when she was 21 months old. Still a baby herself, she cared for him like a little mother, helping to bathe and feed him. They did everything together, both quick learners who thrived on competing with each other. Molly was 8 when her brother Eli was born. She delighted in her role as his sissy, always happy to play with him, determined to teach him things so that he would be ahead when he starts kindergarten, and fiercely protective. Molly's identity as Nate and Eli's big sister was one of the most essential things about her. My sons, I want you to listen to me carefully, okay? And never forget these words. Molly will always love you, and she will always be with you, even though you can't see her. Just like God and the air we breathe, Molly is within us and all around us all the time. And the bond between the 3 of you is something that can never be broken and will last forever. Molly blossomed into a girl with the perfect combination of softness and strength. She began developing her unique worldview at a young age. Molly valued every living being, even an ant that made its way into the house, needed to be gently carried outside on a piece of paper, free to continue living out its natural life. She became a vegetarian in preschool, never once wavering in her moral opposition to eating animals. As John mentioned, this was something Molly did on her own. While we supported her, it was her idea and her choice. One way to honor Molly's memory would be to commit to eating less meat. For example, a meatless Monday, and think of Molly on that day. If she inspires anyone to become a vegetarian or vegan themselves, I know she will be smiling. Molly also had a passion for musical theater. Her first role was the mother in Peter and the Wolf when she was 4 years old at Hillendale. Even as a tiny girl, it was apparent that she took her part extremely seriously. I can still see her up on that stage, just a tiny little girl dressed as an old woman with a wrap around her head and so carefully taking all of her steps. Eli, no. Okay. Molly had some of her happiest moments on stage at Theater Palisades Youth and with Miss Dorothy at Marquez. As with everything she did, Molly gave 110% effort to her plays. She memorized her own lines and everyone else's so that she could be ready to fill in anywhere at a moment's notice. And she actually was looking forward to that happening. She was waiting for someone to fall ill or not be able to show up, and she would then swoop in and everyone would be able to see how committed and amazing she was. Molly loved to sing, loud and proud. And one of the things I'm going to miss most is hearing her belt out songs from behind her room. Thank you to everyone who has supported children's theater programs and the arts in Molly's memory. We hope that many more children will experience the pure joy and confidence that our girl felt on stage. Molly was intellectually curious, always asking questions and rarely forgetting any nugget of information that she stored in her head. She gravitated towards history, government, and language arts. She loved hearing about the legal cases her dad and I worked on, and often had more sensible ideas about how to resolve disputes than the adults who were involved. Molly was fascinated by politics and had aspirations of running for office one day. She joined me in sending hundreds of postcards to voters throughout the country, reminding them to vote in the presidential and Georgia runoff elections. Molly told me how relieved she felt when President Biden and Vice President Harris were elected and when the Democrats regained control of the Senate. She said she was sad that the Republican Party is not what it used to be because we need 2 parties for our system to work. She was so wise. Molly was frightened and angered by the atrocities that we all witnessed during the past 4 years. She had a deep sense of justice and fairness, as you've heard from everyone who's spoken about her today. She could not believe the discrimination that still exists in our world today, and she was determined to change it. The last time Molly attended school in person was when her elementary school closed a year ago. She adored her 5th grade teacher, Miss Kahn, and had been in class with a great group of kids, including her best friend, Emerson. Emmy, thank you for always being such a kind and loyal friend to Molly. Molly often talked about how disappointed she was she didn't get to complete her 5th grade year at Marquez the way she wanted to, starring in Mr. Lantos's historical plays and graduating with her friends. This disappointment is, of course, familiar to every parent who has had a child who's been isolated and unable to just be a kid during this horrible pandemic. Molly started 6th grade last fall, her first year of middle school. She was proud to attend the Geffen Academy at UCLA, and I'm so sad that she won't have the opportunity to continue there. Despite getting to know her educators and fellow students remotely and struggling to adapt to all the changes, Molly made her mark at Geffen. The day after the attempted insurrection at the Capitol, I received an email from Molly's dean, who had never met Molly or me in person. She wrote, I had a chance to talk to a group of 6th graders after lunch about their reflections on the events at the Capitol. I wanted to send you a note to tell you how impressed I was by Molly. She knew everything that was going on at the Capitol, could talk about the facts rather than go into the implications. I told the students that we could do that later in the week. She explained to her classmates the runoff special election, how the vice president is a tiebreaker in the Senate, yesterday's confirmation with such fluency. When I look back on such a difficult day, I remember the joy I had when I heard a 6th grader with such a thorough understanding of democracy. You see, Molly was a shining star, even on the darkest day. We take comfort in the fact that her 12 years were filled with love and simple childhood happiness. She was treasured every day of her life, and she knew it. I wish for every child in the world to have that experience. Thank you to everyone in our village. There are so many of you, I could never mention you all by name, but you know who you are, who contributed to Molly's wonderful life and who are holding us now in our time of grief. A heartfelt thank you to everyone across the country and the world who cared for the child of a stranger like one of their own. You gave us hope and strength to parent Molly in the best way possible during her last 2 weeks. We could not have kept standing without you. What started as a mother's desperate plea to the universe in a moment of utter helplessness became a shining example of the beauty that unfolds when we come together, united in love. God gave us the highest honor of being Molly's parents. John, no one could be a more devoted father to Molly than you. I love you, and so does she. Molly, my precious girl, my heart will never stop aching for you. Nothing feels right without being able to hug you and kiss you and hear your beautiful voice. But know that I am always your mom and you are always my girl. Like I taught you when I was sick, our physical bodies are not who we are. Our spirits are eternal and forever connected. You achieved more meaning in your 12 years than many do with 90 or 100. I will live the rest of my days growing the movement of caring for others and our planet that you sparked and sharing your bright light with the world. I love you forever, Molly, and I am so proud of you.
Okay, I I just want to say something my dad told me, or more like I overheard. So we knew someone who had diabetes, and we knew her from theater, and she had a cell phone, and she was like my age. And so once when Molly went on a Girl Scout trip, to Big Bear or something, she told everyone that she had diabetes, probably so they'd give her a phone or something. And then my mom and dad got a call from the people who were doing it, and they asked if she had diabetes, and they were like, no. So that's something else you need to know to describe like what she was like. She was amazing. I miss her so much. I want her back.
I know, my love. I know. She's with us. She loves you. She loves you.
We come to El Mali Rachamim. We come to the point in our liturgy where we ask that Mali's soul travel quickly and easily to wherever it goes next. None of us knows what that is or what that looks like. But what we know is that we really pray and hope that they're ready for Mali Steinsapir with whatever happens next for all of us. Because Mali is going to take that place by storm. And she's going to say, there's a couple of things you need to answer for that's going on down there. And our job to honor her memory going into Shiva and Shloshim, the 7 days and 30 days after her death, our job is to honor her memory. It is to honor what that means, to honor her spirit, to honor her fight, to honor her spunk, her questioning, her demanding answers, because she deserved them. And we need to commit to teaching our young people they deserve answers. And we better be prepared when they demand answers. And we can best honor her memory going forward by really working for the causes we care about and causes that will make this world the kind of place that Mali wanted it to be. And Mali was a bit outraged that it wasn't. So let us embrace and honor her fierce questioning, her revolutionary spirit, her sharp intellect, her big heart, her big smile, her big sense of humor, and her unwillingness to take an easy given answer for the truth. That's our work, is to continue who she was in the world and what she would have changed this world into with the ways that we can, and that includes how we raise our children. I'm a blue-eyed mother with a black-eyed girl who's also fierce. Let us encourage all of the young people around us to stay fierce, to stay ready to ask the hard questions and to not accept easy answers. All of the young people around us, be they ours, be they people we pass, be they children of friends in Mali's memory, let us encourage them to continue her fight, her quest for honesty, for truth, for accountability, for why this world isn't different already than it should be. We come to El Mali Rachamim. I ask the congregation rise. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Mali Olivia Steinsapir, who has entered eternity. God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is now her inheritance. May she truly rest in peace. As together we say, Amen.
El Malei Rachamim Shochein Ameromim Hametzei Menucha Menucha Nechona תחת כנפי השכינה. במערות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת מירי חנה, בת רחמיאל יונתן וחווה, שהלכה לעולמה. בגן עדן תהי מנוחתה, לכן בר הרחמים יסתיריה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר
So we call Jonathan and Kay forward for cutting of Kriya. Once upon a time in our tradition, a long time ago, when we heard of the death of someone close to us, rent our clothing, because it was a symbol outwardly of what was happening in reality and inwardly, which is a tearing of reality and a tearing of the family and a tearing of our lives that cannot be put back together, that cannot be repaired. And so Jonathan has chosen, and Kay, they've chosen the ways that they wish to express Kriya, the way that they wish to express this tearing that is part of our tradition. And after we cut their garments and they tear those garments, we will recite with them the words of our tradition that are called for at this moment. These are Molly's scissors, and her parents wanted these scissors to be used for the cutting of Kriya.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha'emet. נכון?
Baruch Dayan ha'emet. Blessed is the reality that's bigger than us, that calls things into being that's bigger than us. And we, at this moment, recognize our fragility in the face of reality. We come to Kaddish, we come to Mourner's Kaddish, which doesn't mention death, but blesses the source of life that gave us Molly Olivia.
Just before I say it, I just can't help but saying that I've never said the Kaddish for a relative of the first degree, and it's tough to be doing it for my daughter for the first time. So with that, Yitgadal ve'yitkadesh ve'yikadash shmei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ba'alma divarei kerute ve'yamlich malchute b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye de kol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'v'zman kariv ve'emaru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach u'almei almaya. Yitbarach ve'yishtabach ve'yitpa'ar ve'yitromam ve'yitnaseh ve'yithadar ve'yit'aleh ve'yithalal shemei dekudasha barichu le'ela min kol birchata ve'shirata tushbechata ve'nechemata da'amrim me'alma ve'emaru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min shemaya ve'chayenu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'emaru. Amen. Osei shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol toshvei tevel ve'emaru. Amen.
Amen. Amen. So we leave a stone at the graveside whenever we visit the grave in order to say someone remembers this person and someone has been here to tend this grave. And this person's memory is not forgotten. And we have a headstone at the grave made out of stone to say their memory should last as long and will last as long as it takes this stone to be gone. Stone we feel is permanence. And so the family wants you each to, rather than leave a stone, take a stone, to take Molly with you, to take Molly home, to keep Molly's memory alive, not just with a headstone, but with a stone in your home. You can paint it. It's smooth so that you can paint it. You can write on it. You can do whatever you want with it to honor Molly's memory and use it truly as a touchstone. That when you touch that stone, when it's near you, when you look at it, when you take it with you to something, Molly's with you. Her strength, her grit, her determination, her curiosity, her humor, her passion for life will be with you whenever you choose to take this stone into whatever moment you need to take it into, whatever doctor's office you need to take it into, whatever exam you need to take it into. Take it with you because we know what that will bring you, all that Molly represented for you.
Please be seated. We have a special presentation. It'll be a beautiful, beautiful song written from the heart from a dear friend of Kay's, Jennifer Lee Snowden. Thank you.
I lit a fire with the love you left behind, and it burned wild and crept up the mountainside.
We say to the family of Mali Hamakom, Yinachem etchem b'toch sharei av le'tzion v'Yerushalayim. We ask the one we call the place to comfort you among all the mourners of our people and all of those who mourn children all over this world. Thank you for honoring Molly's life and her memory by being here. And we know that you will do that going forward and to support this family going forward. They will need you. They'll need you to tell stories about Molly. They'll need you to say her name a lot and to keep her bitzror achayim, to keep her embroidered in the tapestry of life by speaking about her, talking about her, and remembering her.
Adonai Erohi lo echsa bino de sheyar bitzeini al mei menuchot al mei menuchot Nafshi Yishovev Yancheni b'maglei tzedek Yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo Gam ki elech begeitz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha Heima yena chamuni